B-Bad and Brandon.
And we have hit record and we are back. The Platform Podcast. I'm pretty sure this is episode 89.
No, it's more.
Nah, just 89.
You sure?
Yeah, including all the bonus episodes, it's more, but yeah.
Well, I thought our last one was 87.
Pretty sure I said I could only come on a prime number episode.
Ooh.
Is this a prime number?
89 would be a prime number.
Well, then we're good. We're all sweet.
88 would definitely not.
Well, then we're good to go. That's very good. You have a very nice shirt today there, Paulie. I'd like to comment on that.
Thank you, Johnny.
Can you confirm or rather pass on the question, are you wearing pants?
We've discussed this.
Absolutely, Johnny.
Excellent.
Seeing that you advertised me as a psychiatrist, I should probably present as a psychiatrist and not as a sort of loose wheel. So people expect their psychiatrists to be wearing pants.
Yeah, well, I remember I sent you a text and asked you what we should put up as a post for you when people want to ask questions, and you said just put up, what did you say, wearing pants today?
I'm pretty sure that's not the same as saying tell everybody I'm a psychiatrist and ask them the same questions.
And survived in spite of himself.
Absolutely. Survived in spite of himself.
Now, for everyone listening, they would have recognised that third voice being Dr. Paul White. We welcome back.
Woo-hoo.
I was just saying before, we seem to, it always seems to align when we go into lockdown.
Yeah. What's with that?
Not my fault. Didn't touch anything.
Good. I hope you didn't touch it. Well, we'll do 21 words, brother. I can't remember if we did it last time, but we'll do it again. 21 words, who you are and what you do.
Will this be your third attempt doing it?
Third attempt doing it, Brando.
Oh, this should be well rehearsed.
Hadn't really thought I was doing it again today. 21 words. Haven't started yet, because Johnny's told everybody I'm a psychiatrist, so I'm a doctor. So 21 words. Go. Father of 5 children, 3 dogs, a grandchild. Got a wife. Got a job. Like to lift heavy things, like BJJ. And I like poetry. I don't think I've added that last one.
No, that was a new one.
So,
yeah.
Big on poetry. So that's 21, isn't it?
Again, we're very loose with the counting vise.
I got it at 20. It was good.
Yeah.
Hold on.
You can't be loose. This last time you counted me down by the word.
Yeah, but it's with the delay in Zoom, it's a bit tricky for me to,
Pressure.
The pressure's on, and as my clients would know, I'm not the greatest counter from 1 to 10 as it is. So
there's a word delay. Yep, can't capture it all.
Yeah, that Johnny's got that as well. He calls it coach's count. Mm-hmm. That's when you go, I've done 15, Johnny. He goes 2 more.
100%. There's always more.
Yeah.
Or yesterday, wasn't it? He's like 5, 4, 4, 4.
I love
3.
that one.
Maybe I didn't like the 4th one, so I wanted another 4th one.
That's amazing.
The 4th one was good. It was the 2nd one that was lousy, but
oh dear.
good judging.
Now, Dr. Paul, your take on this 3-day lockdown. Let's talk to someone who's actually got a DR in front of their name and can have a bit of an opinion. How do you see it?
Good idea. Inevitable. It's going to happen more. It gives them a space to track down loose ends for the exposure. I don't want to die when there's a vaccine coming in the next 6 weeks. I'm old, fat, tired. If I get it, I'm high risk. So, yeah, absolutely reasonable.
And
Well thought out, jammed it over a weekend, so, didn't mess up too many things. Obviously, there are things that are messed up. There's always going to be things that are messed up. It's a plague, kills people. Better not to be dead, so they're cool.
now I have another question off the back of the amount of posts and stuff I read on social media from people who still don't believe that COVID is real. How do you respond to, how does that one, as just a general member of the public, how do you see that? How does that make you kind of respond? And two, as a psychiatrist?
Oh, there are always, as we discussed earlier, there are always a bunch of people. People do people things, behave in people ways. There's always a bunch of people who do things that are at right angles to common sense and what the rest of the society's doing, and you just have to work around them and find a way of dealing with it. I mean, there'll be a whole bunch of people who won't want to take the vaccine when it comes through. Well, they're allowed to do that. They'll die, some of them, but they're allowed to do that. It's when it starts to affect other people that it's a bit of a bother. I've always held that people should be free to do whatever they want as long as it doesn't hurt other people. And if it starts hurting other people or costing them too much, then you probably got to say, no, mate, that's, we don't like that. So, yeah, you're fine not to believe in COVID, but you got to wear a mask anyway because the rest of us do believe in it. You got to stay off the streets for 3 days because the rest of us believe in it. If we're wrong, sorry, but we think we're right. And there's, we're in the majority. That's how sort of social democracy works. So do it. Or it'll cost you $1,500.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's fines and stuff, eh?
Yeah. So that's always been my attitude to it, is there will always be people, they're surprised that people escape, run away from quarantine. But, God, there's a whole bunch of jails and people keep trying to run away from them as well. It's locking people up isn't good for them. It might be necessary, but it's not good for them. In fact, it's downright bad for people. But that's just life, Deal with it.
As we said before, people do people things, and
just enjoy your 3 days at home.
Yeah, it's like
and 10% of people do kind of really weird, dodgy things in any, like I said, in any race, creed, colour, religion, whatever. 10% of them are going to be a bit dodgy. So you got to build your systems around them and work around them.
Why is it that there's 10% of people, and now we're not just talking obviously this in relation to COVID, but in every situation as you were talking before, why is it that 10% of people just, teeter with that line of doing that dodgy thing?
It's a good question, Brando. I don't know the answer to it, mate. There's look, they did a what's called a birth cohort study in Christchurch, Dunedin, and a similar one in Edinburgh, where they grabbed every child being born for a set period of time and follow them up. It's kind of like this 7-Up thing. They do it a bit more scientifically. So the Christchurch Dunedin study, 1,500 kids, they followed them up. They were all the kids born in Dunedin and Christchurch, which is kind of good because it's geographically relatively isolated and takes some of the other co-founders out. And it's the pedo law that 20% of the kids accounted for 80% of the social welfare cost. It's a bit more than your 10%, but it's still, there's a relatively small group that that sit on the margins of society. Now, some of those people are there through very few people, I suspect, are there. Most of the people are there through no fault of their own. But I mean, there are some who make, like people who go to prison repeatedly for doing dumb things. Quite a lot of them, prison's where they go. So the question of why, I don't know anybody's got a good answer to that. And it's an area I've studied for a long time. There are lots of social reasons and biological reasons why it happens to any one individual person. But when you're talking about whole groups of people, it's a little bit more complicated. Sure, in Australia, if you look at the Indigenous folk, colonisation and the subsequent genocide was obviously, an appalling experience for them, and the idea of transgenerational trauma is very reasonable, and there are epigenetic studies that show that the effects of trauma in one generation are passed on for another 2 or 3 through genetic ways, not just the sort of social effects that are going on, but I mean, there are as many different reasons as there are people.
Yeah, right.
They had a run at this in the sort of social theories of marginalisation have been around since probably the 17th century, but Marx had a good go at looking at it from a sort of economic point of view. But it's interesting, even Marx and Freud and those guys who were the early modelers of social movement would put things in about the intellectually disabled and the seriously mentally ill, saying this is our social model, but it doesn't apply to these guys. So, being intellectually disabled or having a complex disability or having a serious mental illness puts you at a considerable risk in all of those social models. And that's why you have to have a safety net, something that picks those people up. And we do in Australia, we do okay at it. That's my job, is looking after intellectually disabled people and some of the more marginalised groups of people. And I spent 20 years working in the prisons, most pretty full-time.
Wow.
There's lots of, there's lots of people who've just had a bad run. I mean, there are other people who've just done the wrong thing. But so, long answer to your question, Brando. It's a hard question. Nobody's got the right answer for it yet.
Yeah, because like we were talking about before, I've adopted this notion, and I think it comes with the territory of, I guess, I look at myself as a leader within the community, that you can't fix every little thing that arises. And once you accept the notion of that people do people things, it drops a weight of expectations off you. You don't have to feel that you hold people to the same standard that you may put out or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you look at a bell curve for most social, you can ram most social measurements into a bell curve. There'll always be a bunch of people well out to the right who've had a really great time, and then there's always a group 2 standard deviations to the left who are having a really terrible time. and I think it's about trying to shift. It's often, it's about trying to shift the curve a bit to the left to pick up more of those people than attacking the individual and trying things there. As I'm sure you've discovered, that can be a bit complicated. Mind you, that's what I do for a living, so I'm not talking my job down, just that
it's hard.
It's a bit complicated. Yeah. Oh, I've never claimed my job's hard. Dear God, I wouldn't want anybody to think that I work too much, but it's it's complicated. Takes a bit of thinking about it. Yeah.
Where did what you do now? Where did that all start for you, bro? Like, you're incredibly well studied. How far do we go back for you?
Oh, I probably wouldn't have done medicine on my own. I was pretty keen to do a fine arts course, but my parents, I think, quite reasonably didn't think I'd ever make a living out of being a writer or anything like that. So I did medicine, and I wasn't a good student. In fact, I was an appalling student. But I passed, and I was better at other things, much better at a lot of other things. Did my intern year in Toowoomba. That was pretty, back in that, your intern year's the worst year of your life.
Yep.
And I don't know that it still is, but back in those days it was pretty creepy.
What sort of work would you be doing then?
Oh, everything. You're the first person on in the emergency department at night time. In fact, you're the only person on for the entire hospital.
Shit.
At night time. So you could always wake somebody up, but you try not to do that because they're working pretty long hours too. Then I went to Mackay for a couple of years, and I relaxed a bit more because I knew a bit more and had a bit more fun up there. And I went down to Melbourne because I thought I'd like to specialise in emergency medicine. And I had it in my head that I wanted to work in the country because, I grew up in Toowoomba. So I had in my head country hospital, that'd be me. I was in Melbourne for a couple of years, got tired of that, didn't like Melbourne much. Came back up here and decided to give psychiatry a run. Partly because it was a better lifestyle than emergency, partly because the things you had to know were things that the books you had to read were books that I was already reading.
Yep. The idea of getting inside someone's head and seeing what goes on in there was something that interests you as well?
Yeah, well, I think at that stage it was just trying to, that's right. Just trying to understand why other people did things. And that was, and I've always been interested in that. So chopping across to psychiatry wasn't hard. I enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy the exam process, but I enjoyed the training and I've enjoyed the jobs. So I finished, like a lot of people who end up looking after intellectually disabled people. I'm not sure why, but a lot of us have come from forensics, from working in the intersection between psychiatry and the law. And for me, that was prison and high secure work, working with mentally ill offenders, and then over time, and just sort of it was the way it was, I ended up with looking after a whole bunch of intellectually disabled people in hospital, in secure units, and I took the notion that they shouldn't be there. And I had a bit of a fight for a while with everybody really for about a decade, and fortunately the world's a lot better place now, and the NDIS is coming through, and things are a lot more relaxed than they were 30 years ago. I mean, 30 years ago, abuse and rape and, everybody was like, every patient I saw had been the victim of something.
Yeah, being in a prison system like that would be horrible.
Usually something pretty devastating.
Yep.
And now that's uncommon.
Yeah.
It's so uncommon it makes the newspapers, whereas back in the day it was commonplace.
Yeah.
And it was hard to get anything done about it. These days it's a phone call and everybody's aware and alert and ready to go, and that's that's good.
Yeah. How long did you work in the prison system for?
15, 20 years. I was probably doing like I wasn't full time there. I was in the secure units, high and medium secure mental health units, and also doing some prison work. Because there's a lot of people in prison with mental health problems. Prison's bad for, prison's not, it's not just that it's not good for people, it is bad and damaging for the vast majority of people.
Could you see people go into a prison system that were maybe okay, but then their process of being within the system created challenges for themselves mentally as well? Oh,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were people who came in because they were unwell, or, they were self-medicating some mental illness with drugs and alcohol. But there were a bunch of people, and I think it's fairly well documented, there's a bunch of people who come in and the stress of prison is just a bit too much and it's a bit too traumatic, and they develop all sorts of mental illnesses as a result. Yeah. Absolutely.
So would you say in that breath that it's, for the majority, the prison system works?
It depends on what you want your prison system to do. Like most people think of prison, that prison should be rehabilitative and therapeutic, but that's only a recent, prisons came about because they decided to stop executing people for stealing bread and the like. So prison has always philosophically been a means of punishment to replace capital punishment. So the notion that it should be rehabilitative or change people in some way for the good is a relatively recent idea. So does prison help people? Probably not. Not for the vast majority of people. It's I think rarely rehabilitative. It's certainly a punishment. It's bloody unpleasant for everybody who's there. So it sort of depends on, does prison work? It punishes people. Does it make them less likely to commit future offences? I think Queensland's got a recidivism rate of about 80%. So on their third, people who are in prison for one offence have got an 80% chance of committing a second, and they've got an 80% chance of committing a third. They're about the best figures I know. So it doesn't stop many people from committing crimes, no.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
And obviously the deterrence value, that was the third thing I was trying to think of. There's punishment, rehabilitation and deterrence. And it obviously doesn't deter a lot of people because your prison rate, people put prison rates up in countries and the crime rate doesn't come down. I mean, an example is the US, which has the highest incarceration rate of its own civilians of any country in the world, other than perhaps China, and we don't know about China, but certainly there's a greater proportion of African Americans in prison than there were Africans in prison when South Africa had apartheid. So America imprisons huge numbers of their citizens, and these for-profit prisons that make fortunes for people. If you wanted to make, it's probably too late because there's, the big players are already in prisons. But if you wanted to make a fortune starting in the 1950s, being in a private prison was a good place to start.
Yeah.
Huge money. So prisons aren't probably, they lock people up and they punish them. But the other stuff, they probably don't. I don't think there's much evidence that they achieve anything other than that.
Do you think the mindset around why we use prisons, or I guess not even the mindset, I'm getting sick of that word. I guess the mentality and the way we view prisons need to change?
I think Queensland's had a few runs at it. Before you guys were born, there was a guy called Jim Kennedy did a commission inquiry and came down with a really good report, which would have probably which introduced the idea of private prisons, but probably would have reduced the number of people imprisoned. But they didn't really introduce Jim Kennedy's, like all his recommendations, and the system didn't really work. And like when I was finished in prison, there were most of the prisons had people sleeping 2 to a room, and many had 3 to a room in rooms that were designed for, one person. So I don't think that's as big a problem, but certainly under Newman, where they went about imprisoning a whole bunch of people, they made a lot of prisoners unhappy, didn't really achieve anything except making a whole bunch of prisoners unhappy. Certainly didn't reduce crime rates or change the mindset of the group of people who go through prison. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think you've got to have prisons. You can't. It's hard to think of running a society like ours without prisons because, people do people things, and they need to. There's nothing other than we have nothing other than punishment, and trying to persuade people not to commit offences is a bit difficult. They don't pay much attention to that either. So, I mean, in the 60s and 70s, there was a big move in the States, of all places, to try to slow down the incarceration model. And there's a guy called Carl Messenger, wrote a book called The Crime of Punishment, which is worth a read by anybody inclined, where he argued that people who committed offences could be treated with psychotherapy and or a talk therapy of kind, and diverted from their life of crime. Well, that's wrong. That it doesn't work on the vast majority of people. But obviously, if there was an easy answer, we'd probably go with that.
Yeah, so it's almost the best option we have for now.
Yeah, look, in England they've got therapeutic communities where they put long stay, really dangerous, psychopathic criminals people who've committed multiple offences and are as dangerous or get out. They've got a part of their Mental Health Act where they can detain people in that class to these secure hospitals, and they're run as a therapeutic community. So they're in a large part they're run by the inmates.
Right.
And the last thing in the world as a psychopath that you want is to be looked after by a whole bunch of other psychopaths. Community, because, as a psychopath, you come out and go, oh, no, I didn't do it, and look around the room and everybody goes, Yeah, you did. Or she deserved it. That's not going to run in a room full of psychopaths. So there are some figures from their hospitals that they've some benefit from spending 10 or 15 years there, but I don't know that there's any good evidence that spending 10 or 15 years anywhere doesn't make a bit of difference to you. So, and they're really expensive and they're really intensive, and I'm not sure that they actually do what they say they do.
Yeah.
Right.
So sorry, guys, don't have an answer to that one.
So
I got one. Don't go to prison.
Yeah.
Don't do dumb
Absolutely.
shit. Don't do dumb shit that sends you to prison.
Don't go to jail. It's not nice. It's not fun. You're not going to enjoy it. So don't do that.
Now, you mentioned before that you work a lot with intellectually disabled people. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Now, is that something you kind of fell into, like I guess a specialty, or was your interest in that field?
50-50, I think.
Yeah.
Like I took over when I got my fellowship in 1990, so I became a specialist. I took over a couple of wards that had been described in a Royal Commission a few years earlier as the worst wards in Australia, and they were pretty appalling place for people to live. And with a bit of jiggery-pokery, we moved most of those folk out of there and they were locked wards. We moved most of those people out into open wards and managed to look after them and manage, most of them we got out of hospital within a few years. And then I was left with this group of intellectually disabled people who I couldn't move through the mental health system. And I started getting a bit angry about the fact that they were stuck in an institution, what I thought was wrongly, and I thought it was a very abusive situation and that their human rights were being abused big time. So the fight went on. And it was a fight. And the more I did it, the more I became aware of this appalling state for intellectually disabled people in Queensland and their families. It was pretty horrible, appalling for their families and the burden that they faced and how just surviving with a loved one with a disability. So, I quite like being angry at something, and this gave me something good to be angry about. It's better to be angry at something that's socially beneficial and I've always believed that life's not about being happy. There are very few people who are like that's if you're going to go through your whole life expecting to be happy the whole time, you're going to be disappointed. But if you can go through life, looking after other people, doing stuff for other people, like the two of you do, it's about being able to serve other people and feeling grateful for that opportunity. If you do that, then you're going to spend life being pretty happy about it. So if you go around looking for happiness, it's not there. But if you go around looking to look after other people and to care for them and worry about them, then happiness just sort of creeps in on you.
Do you where do you stand with this whole don't seek happiness, be content with where you are? And I feel like that's over drilled in today's society about not chasing happiness because it's always elusive. But as you said, it's the way I've kind of looked at it myself is it's just another emotion that we experience in our day-to-day.
Happy, sad, angry, scared. The ethnologists and the anthropologists say that, they argue about whether there are 4 or 6 basic emotions in all
what are the other
cultures. But, guilt and shame, but I don't think they're emotions. I think they're like shame is what you feel when you get caught. Guilty is probably what you feel if you do something bad and you're worried about it. It has an internal effect on yourself and you're worried about it. So I don't count shame, because if you don't get caught, and we're all been there, like if you don't get caught, you're like, oh, I don't feel very good about that. But if you do get caught, you feel a lot worse about it. So I go with happy, sad, angry, scared.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it becomes a bit of a subtle argument that it's too complicated for me. I'll stick with what's simple, and but you can't. I don't think you can go looking for happiness. It's not there as a target. People who go all out on having a good time, that doesn't create happiness. That's having a good time, and maybe happiness is incidental to that, but it doesn't last. It doesn't sustain. Not that I've ever seen. I'm go looking to do good. To do good things. The old Aristotle thing of a good life. How do I lead a good life, and how do I know I'm leading a good life? Well, his view, and that's 2,500 years ago, was you go around looking after other people, caring for people, and that the rest follows in order after that.
And you probably a good balanced life would be experience with all the emotions there, not just living in one as well.
Yeah. I mean, we don't like many of them, but there you go.
So part of the
alternative's worse. Not having them's worse.
Yeah.
I can't remember the person by name, but he's one of those big influencers saying that he never experiences anger. That to me screams that you're not what I would look at as a well-balanced human, because as you said, there are basic emotions. Like you can't fucking not experience something's going to piss you off in a day.
You can't not be angry. The only people I've ever seen who could sort of do that to an extent were pretty disturbed human beings. And they've let their anger out other ways,
Maybe they they can't recognise what anger is.
Yeah. But you can't, there's a limit to how much you can't not have anger. I mean, it sounds like something Jordan Peterson would say. And look, a lot of what Peterson's got to say is good, but some of it's really dumb, unsophisticated, university, high school stuff. It's not very clever.
Yeah,
it's funny because I just finished reading his 12. Well, I'm going to stop myself. I didn't read it. I listened to it, but I just finished his 12 Rules for Life, and I found that book.
Can I just? I'm sitting in my office, and somebody just cut it. My wife is gardening, and she just chopped a large bamboo branch down.
That you didn't know about?
Don't know. There was a lot of discussion about that one, Johnny.
Mate, what she's done has been very clever. She knows you're in a podcast, and you can't stop that from happening.
Bit odd. I wonder why she did that. Look, there she is. There's her little hands. Can you see the branch being dragged over the...
That's hilarious.
Oh, that's disappearing now, Paulie. No more bamboo, brother.
Yeah. She's taken it. We've got an easement. How odd. We've got strange things happen around me, Johnny. You know that. We've got an easement around
You're actually not allowed in that garden anymore, mate.
She's not allowed to do that.
You're not allowed to be down there either.
The sad thing is that we're not allowed to put any rubbish down there. It's a drainage easement. So at some point, I'm going to have to pull that back up and out of there and then work out how to get it out of the yard. Oh, well.
Please make sure you're wearing shoes.
I'll wear shoes, Johnny. I'll wear shoes. I don't have shoes on at the moment, but that's... Brando, do you know the story of me having to wear shoes?
No, I have not heard this one.
Oh, let me tell you, I'm a bad patient. I'm a bad patient. About
Who has a medical background, and you still
8
decided?
weeks ago. 8 weeks ago. Look, and when it comes to my family, I'm an appalling doctor. I've missed 3 broken bones in my son, and my wife would assert that I missed 5 in her. That's only 2 falls, and I have to say that I'm happy to go with I missed the ones in the first time, but I was in Maryborough. Look, and it relates to the cutting down this bamboo. She let me buy a chainsaw, you know? This was probably early in our relationship as well. So she should, I wasn't bedded in properly. So she let me buy a chainsaw. What's a boy going to do with a chainsaw? Cut trees down. So I cut a couple of trees down. Now, I felled them very well. One landed in the swimming pool, but neither of them hit the fence. So I was pretty happy, but she was a bit shocked because she didn't know the trees were going to come down. And I was like, well, why did you let me buy a chainsaw if not to cut trees down? So anyway, I cut them up into bits and I stacked them in a pile, and she said after a couple of months, move the pile. So I moved the pile, and then she went out hanging clothes out at night while I was working in Maryborough, fell over the pile and broke her arm. So she immediately blamed me for breaking her arm. And, yeah, and said, do you think my arm's broken? I was like, oh, I don't know. I'm in Maryborough, but probably not. And, in fact, it was. So I was out in the backyard. I was planting some bamboo, doing some landscaping, pottering around. And I stood on in bare feet, and I stood on a bit of pottery that was broken, which I had put there. And I shaved up under my big toe, up along the bone, and sort of cleaned it from close to far away, and cleaned the tendon off as well. And I thought, I was standing in mushroom compost at the time because that's what I was using to bury stuff. And I thought at the time, it's a dirty wound. They won't want to close it straight away. We'll wait until the morning. We won't bother anybody. Kind of cleaned it out myself. It was bleeding a lot.
Fuck.
So and it hurt. It hurt a real lot. So I went in the next day and everybody was like, oh, why didn't you come in last night?
And then what did you have that night when you were there? Surgery.
I was in surgery in about 2 hours. Getting the tendon sewn back on and
Bloody hell.
Getting stitches and having antibiotics. And I was in hospital for a couple of nights getting IV antibiotics because apparently there's stuff in mushroom compost that shouldn't be inside you.
Far out.
And I'm still not. And it hurt. I got to tell you, it really hurt.
Yeah, it sounds like it too.
And I had to wear this boot, which I'm still wearing, whatever it is, 12 weeks later. Got another week of wearing the boot, and then I'm allowed to take it off. So it's all a bit of a drama. So if you're gardening in your backyard, wear shoes. And if you cut most of your toe off, go to hospital straight away. They do things differently now than they did 30 years ago when I was looking after that stuff.
Bloody hell.
Yeah.
Plus the anaesthetics these days are pretty cool. And they gave me some propofol for my anaesthetic. I'd never had propofol before. That's the drug that Michael Jackson and Prince both died of overdosing on.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, right.
They were using it as a sleeping tablet. Like the rest of us use it as a general anaesthetic when they're having their toes sewn back on. But, yeah, it lasted for about 4 days. I was as spacey as. And if you're going to spend 2 days in hospital, it's probably better that that you don't remember too much of it afterwards. But there you go. If you're in hospital needing an operation, ask for propofol.
And wear shoes when gardening.
Well, one of my friends, one of my bosses said, my mistake was not having a gardener. So while I disagree with Airtasker on many, many philosophical grounds, I'll probably give a young person an opportunity to plant the rest of the bamboo via Airtasker.
Oh, dear.
No.
Now, bro, a little bit out of the garden. You do and have done a lot of work in some like far communities, Indigenous communities and stuff, yeah?
Yeah.
That'd be quite interesting, eh?
Yeah. Well, again, hived off from my interest in intellectual disability, there's an enormous number of people in those very rural and remote communities with disabilities, and a lot of them historically have been unrecognised or dealt with within community and not, and that's, I think, created an enormous, I don't want to say burden because that's not the right word, but it's an enormous momentum of care in one direction that they haven't been able to do a lot of the other things that they'd like to do. You know, like you think if you've got somebody who's got needs 24-hour care, so that probably need 3 or 4 people, family members, to provide 24-hour care. So there's 5 people all sorted out. If 10% of your community has that level of disability, then 50% of your community is doing nothing else but looking after the people with the disability. Which makes it hard for the community to do anything else and to go in other directions. And I thought maybe that's part of the problem with some of these little remote and rural communities not being able to change the way they do business. So I think that's being borne out a bit. But the other thing is it's just fun to go and stay. You know, I've stayed in most places in Queensland now.
You've been to some pretty remote areas, haven't you?
Yeah, and who else is going to pay me to, charter a helicopter and fly around the Torres Strait or fly in and out of Gulf communities and all of that stuff's pretty wild, and it's and you see some pretty interesting folk along the way, and who are making their way in interesting and diverse, frightening ways.
And it's a pretty spectacular landscape too that you've managed to walk.
Yeah, fantastic landscape, and getting to know some of the Indigenous folk who are out there and how they do business and how they go about doing what they do. A little bit about how people in a tribal community think about the world, which is very different to what we do. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
What sort of differences would they be thinking to us?
Oh, Johnny, it's a very different. The big one is that I think decisions are made by the group and within the group. So it's very cohesive. So I don't go in straight away and ask somebody a question. I ask the elders or the community, can I ask the question? Is this a question that can be asked? And if I want to ask it, what language do I use? How do I go about it? Can I approach the person? It's likely that somebody from community will approach the person and see whether it's all right for me to do that. So it's a much more regulated and a much more, I think in some ways it's a much more caring situation, or possibly a much more caring situation. But folk decision-making processes are very, very different. Not probably better or worse, just different. But if you don't respect that it's different and different in ways that we can't know, all we can do is accept that it's different and ask the right way. That's okay. People, if you do that and you're polite and respect people, you usually get on okay.
There's probably no handbook to learn that method of being able to talk and get into the communities like that. You would have had to have learned your way through that one, right?
I don't think there are any handbooks. If there are, I don't know, and they're not. It's a bit hard to explain. You sort of, be nice to people, respectful, hang around, and wait to get noticed. Don't try to push your way in and tell people you know what's good for them. They don't like that.
No.
Being patient and waiting and drinking lots of cups of tea and making lots of cups of tea. That's the trick. You can't rush it. It will happen when it happens.
And it must be cool, like, to go back year on year or trip on trip and see some of the positive changes come in those communities as well, right?
I think that's true, Johnny. I think there's been a lot of movement in the last decade, and things are a lot better than they were. And certainly, I think the NDIS is starting to chuck a bit of money in the right way, and people are sort of starting to trust it a bit, and that will help in the longer term. In some of the places, Tennant Creek, Wolf Creek, far northwestern Northern Territory, where they did which is sort of the Kakadu Plateau, runs out to the sea and into Queensland. They did the rollout of the NDIS in remote rural areas there, and there's a bit of evidence to show that people's lives are better and people are a bit happier than they were before this started happening. So I think that's hopeful. It's
absolutely. That's pretty cool, bro. And mate, you've got I love the idea of you've got a nice hobby of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, bro. You are.
Oh, Johnny, that's your fault. You got me started on that. What, 8 years ago?
I think it's not
as you well know, it's not a hobby. It's a
lifestyle.
It's a passion. People say, you're addicted to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I go, yep, yes, I certainly am. There are many worse things in the world to be addicted to.
Absolutely.
And if that's what it takes, so I love it. I can't do it at the moment because of my toe, but as soon as I get the go ahead in a week, it's about a week.
The go ahead, we'll see. Maybe run that go ahead past me too, please.
I'll wrap it up, my foot up pretty tightly, and have a go at it.
We actually got a question for you about BJJ, Paul.
Go on. Yeah. Okay.
Josh Ferguson wants to know your favourite BJJ submission.
Squash, crush. That's all I've got, Brandon. My age and my weight. There's no subtlety about what I do. I get on top of people and I squash them. So that's what I did to Josh. I just get on top and squash him.
I can agree that being squashed by Dr. Paul is unpleasant.
If I can get a choke or something going underneath me while that's happening, well, that's good. I'm happy to claim that was the cause of people getting up. But strangles are what I do. I get in I get in and I get a hand in on a collar somewhere, and then work out how to fix it and pin it in place. And so Josh can worry about strangles from now on.
There you go, a little bit of an inside scoop for anyone who comes up.
Your neck is not safe.
Yeah. My training partner in all this time has been Johnny, and I've got to say that it might be unpleasant for people to have me on top of them, but having Johnny on top of you,
Johnny's a thick human.
Oh, he's big and he's strong, and he does this thing called knee ride. So he gets past you and puts a knee on your stomach, or more on the bottom of your rib cage, and then rests there for a while waiting to see what you do. That's just that's really unpleasant.
Fucking hell.
The key is to dig it in.
Absolutely. You got to have, if you want to roll with John, you got to have core. Core, and you got to be able to move. If you can't, he's big, so you got to be able to go lateral and come on an angle with Johnny, and that's if you can do that, you can cause him some inconvenience. But at some point, you get. Well, I'll end up going through somewhere that he can get hold of me or use his strength, and then it's like, God, he can bench press me with one arm. What am I going to, Oh, well. Something for me to work on.
We take great joy in trying to beat each other up.
We do.
We'll have to get some footage.
There is some floating around somewhere.
Mostly it's Johnny videotaping me getting squashed.
We'll have to get Brando in for some cuddle time. He can come in underneath us.
Well, I'm very much of the old saying, I am much more a lover than a fighter.
We love lovers in BJ.
Yeah.
We welcome them with open arms.
And with a collar choke to celebrate their visit to the mat with us.
Put our danger pajamas on, and we're fine.
Oh dear!
Think of it; it's just full body contact yoga.
That's exceptional. I've never thought of it like that.
Teach you meditation and how to relax and be calm in, while you've got both your knees in your mouth and a toe in one ear, and you just learn how to not panic and know that it'll go away, and it's good. It's a good form of meditation.
Oh yeah. What's the year of 21 look for you, Mr. Paulie, mate? Anything exciting on the cards for you, bro?
Oh, beat Johnny at BJJ. Try not to do anything drastically stupid to myself. As soon as we can travel again, my gift to me will be a trip to Bali with us. We go, and a few of the boys would go surfing for as long as I can afford to.
Yep.
I do like.
I think you said you'd shout me and Johnny.
I think we were coming.
Yeah, 100%.
Shoutings. I know somewhere you can stay.
Because you do have quite a passion for travel as well. I know.
Love travel. Try to do an overseas trip with Claire each 12 months.
Yep.
So this time last year we were actually in Gorome in Turkey there's a place called Cappadocia, which is where you see a lot of the balloon, like hundreds of balloons, hot air balloons up in the sky for the dawn flight. Didn't do that, but Cappadocia is also it's up really high highlands in Turkey, eastern Turkey, and it's very civilization. There's very, very old. There are cave civilizations there, like from 3,000, 4,000 years ago. That's out to the east towards Iraq, down towards Syria in the south. We didn't go because it's not really safe, but there's some civilization sites there that go back maybe 8,000 years.
Wow.
It's pretty cool seeing that stuff and wandering around where people have been doing people stuff and seeing that people have always been people. As soon as the lid's off, I don't know. Claire wants to go to Georgia and the Caucasus Mountains. I want to go to Paris and live there. So we'll have a discussion, I'm sure.
Maybe you need a summer home in Paris.
Look, came up on my we often travel around Christmas time. 4 years ago, we were in Paris. We did that 3-month stint. We went over in an apartment and stayed there for 3 months. And photos of me at the BJJ gym in Paris came up because I did some training over there. 3 months is too long to go without BJJ. So, you can do BJJ anywhere.
Oh, yeah, bro. Now, Mr. Dr. Paul, we have 10 questions for you. These are 10 new questions you have not been asked. Are you ready for them?
Geez, you must have a lot of questions because,
I do have a lot of questions. What makes you unique?
I walk with a limp because tried to cut my toe off.
Who are the special people in your life?
Wife, family. I got to say, Johnny's special.
Johnny's very special.
I don't have many friends. Johnny, maybe a few guys from BJJ. Other than that, that's about it.
If you could star in a movie, what would it be and who would you be?
Oh, gee, that's a good question. I'd like to be Jean-Luc Picard in Star Trek.
Ooh.
Yeah, right.
Nice.
Make it so, number one. Make it so.
What is your most used emoji?
Smiley face.
Lovely. What dinosaur would you like to be as a kid?
Oh, that'd have to be a Tyrannosaurus Rex, wouldn't it?
100%. 100%.
If you could find out how and when you're going to die, would you?
No. Why would you want to know something like that?
What age do you feel right now?
12 and a half. On a good day.
What pet did you own growing up?
Sorry, what did?
What animal or pet did you own growing up?
Dog called Penny.
Lovely. What kind of dog?
Penny was first. Penny was supposed to be a corgi, and she was a bit corgi.
Yep. What is the best thing that happened to you last week?
Oh, not including being locked down, because I'm pretty good at being locked down. Don't know.
Probably hanging out with Eddie, I'd say.
Oh, yeah, to be hanging out with Eddie. Yeah, I'll go with that. I was trying to think. See, you haven't let me have a go at picking up anything, pushing anything heavy recently. So I was trying to think what I'd done in the gym that was. I've got to say, after yesterday, I'm feeling a bit rested, like resting today, which means I'll feel incredibly sore tomorrow, but I won't you guys because that doesn't work.
All good, bro. That's it. Thank you very much, my man.
We really appreciate again your time on our podcast. You're a favoured guest now.
Does that put him in front of Pete? Has he got more visits than Pete now?
No, Pete's Pete's got 4.
Shit.
Got 3, and I want to do like that. Would make me really happy if I could get one with Pete, where you don't advertise me as a psychiatrist. I can just come along as Paul the powerlifter with Pete. I reckon
With pants.
I reckon we could be helpful.
Done.
I think that would be fun. I'd like to ask Pete in front of a camera.
Oh, now I want to know.
February 6th, lock it in.
I'm very happy to ask Pete some questions.
Love it.
All the psychiatrists ask Peter. That's how I feel. There's that show in England, which is a bit weird, where the psychiatrists ask people questions and like celebrities, interview celebrities. I'll do that with Pete.
Yeah.
Yes.
I feel like we could get you on with a bunch of our guests and you could do the side commentary questions for us.
Pete, tell me about the trial, mate. I really want to hear that story.
We all do.
Oh, dear.
Paul, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. People know where to find you, and I'll definitely put it all in the show notes. You're a frequent flyer.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, brother.
Thank
Bye.
you.